So my few tips for when you're standing in the supermarket aisle. So the very first thing you want to look at is how the olive oil is packaged. So light, heat, and oxygen are the three enemies to good olive oil. So right away, if you see a clear bottle, you rule it out because light has basically already destroyed the contents of that olive oil.
Okay.
The second thing you want to look for is the material. So the only packaging that's safe for olive oil is glass and aluminum tins.
Okay.
Never plastic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I am welcoming my friend and fellow entrepreneur, Katina Mountanos. She's the founder and CEO of Kosterina. This is a wellness brand centered around high antioxidant, extra virgin olive oil, and more broadly, the Mediterranean lifestyle. Katina's mission at Kosterina is to help people live longer, more delicious lives, and is continuing to prove that healthy can also be delicious. Katina discovered what real olive oil tasted like in her family home in southern Greece, and she officially launched Kosterina in 2020 to share the benefits of the Mediterranean lifestyle. Kosterina now offers a full line of delectable vinegars, olives, olive oils, and an olive oil-based skincare line with additional products in the pipeline. Today, I welcome Katina to the podcast to talk all about the science-backed nutrition of olive oil, how she started her own company, and how she ensures she is bringing the highest quality, antioxidant-rich olive oil to the consumer at an affordable price. Katina, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. We had a entrepreneur to entrepreneur conversation. I was learning about your brand just personally. And then I was really excited just to bring you on the podcast because you're so well versed in the olive oil industry after launching your own amazing brand, Kosterina. It's a staple in our house. We see it at Whole Foods. I'm sure the people listening have all seen it, the blue and white bottles on the shelves. So thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge.
Kelly, I'm so excited to be here. I've been a follower of yours for so long. It's really, really an honor. I'm super excited to connect.
Well, yeah, you blew me away with some of your knowledge. And I think what's important for me to share with the audience is something that we've talked about offline, which is, the newer research coming out showing that there is such a robust antioxidant profile in olive oil and that it can be suitable for higher heat. And previously, I wrote my first book back it was 2015 and 2016, and then it was launched. And, I was really focused on smoke points, as was a lot of people in the wellness industry. And I think, what's really important to me is that my audience always has up-to-date information. And I'm cooking with olive oil in my home. I'm roasting vegetables with olive oil, and I'm getting a bunch of DMs like, what are you doing? What about this smoke point? So can we start there? Can we talk about what the newest research says in regards to olive oil and smoke points?
Yes, absolutely. And this is definitely a myth that I'd love to debunk. You can and absolutely should cook with extra virgin olive oil. It just has to be the right olive oil. And so, for many, many years, the US consumer has been told not to cook with olive oil because it has a low smoke point, exactly what you're describing. And it's pretty much common knowledge to people here, but it's unfortunately incorrect. And when I've heard it throughout my life, I've always wondered, what does one cook with if not with olive oil? I'm Greek. I grew up between this small town in southern Greece and New York, and we literally make everything in olive oil. We fry our eggs in it. We roast our veggies. We marinate for barbecue. We deep fry in olive oil. So it never really made any sense to me. And after launching Kosterina and kind of digging into this question, the research that I was referring to when we first chatted was a study by ACTA. It's from 2018, so it's not super new. But the reason that the olive oil in this country has been deemed to have a low smoke point is because it's been low quality. And low quality olive oil actually does have a low smoke point. So a high quality olive oil that is rich in those polyphenols you were talking about, which are antioxidants that protect it, has actually a very high smoke point. So you can cook up to almost 450 degrees in most cases. And so the second problem with this myth is that smoke point is actually not a good measure for whether you should cook with an oil. It's actually the level of free radicals emitted when temperature is applied. And extra virgin olive oil actually has the fewest level of free radicals emitted when temperature is applied.
Oh my goodness. So now we have to ask the follow-up question of how are we differentiating between a good olive oil and a bad olive oil? And I want you to take us back to when you started your business, Kosterina, and what you learned about the industry from, the olive growing on the tree all the way through being picked, sent from Greece, bottled, Like, where are the points at which we can have problems along the way? And how are we, as the consumer, able to walk into our favorite grocery store, like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts, look at the multiple bottles and choose the right one?
Yeah.
This is
Such
101, Katina. Give them all the education.
such a loaded question. So to answer your question about taking you back to the beginning of Kosterina, basically my family came from this town called Koroni, which is the home of the Koroneiki olive. This is the olive that grows throughout all of Greece. It happens to be naturally very high in polyphenol content, and it also happens to taste amazing. So this is the olive oil that I grew up on. My grandfather was a fisherman, and my grandmother would cook fresh fish every day with two things: olive oil and lemon. And that was literally all the flavor you need when you are working with such a good olive oil. So fast forward to me becoming an adult, starting a family and cooking more at home here in the US. I went to Fairway in New York City to buy Greek extra virgin olive oil. And I was honestly just horrified. I was like, this is actually disgusting. Like, I don't even know how it can say Greek extra virgin olive oil on the bottle. And I just became really interested in finding good olive oil here in the US. I could find it only at places like Italy in Manhattan for $50+ a bottle.
Mhm.
And so I ended up taking an olive oil sommelier course. And that's where I learned a ton about how olive oil should be packaged, what it should taste like, but also these incredible health benefits. And so, what's special about an early harvest extra virgin olive oil, and by the way, 101 on early harvest just means that you pluck the olive off the tree before it's ripe, while it's still green.
Okay.
And you preserve the natural polyphenol content that occurs in that olive. I always like to explain to people basically, an olive tree grows in very arid conditions. There's not a lot of water. It is susceptible to the elements. Sometimes it grows at very high altitudes, sometimes it grows near the sea. And it actually is creating those antioxidants or polyphenols to protect itself, to help it grow and to survive. And so we get the benefit of all those amazing antioxidants when we consume those types of olives. So these types of polyphenols have been proven by hundreds of studies. I would say it's essentially undisputed, and it's such a cornerstone to the Mediterranean diet to reduce your risk of cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and even as few as 2 teaspoons a day of this type of olive oil will give you those health benefits. So yeah, really just starting with just how powerful those antioxidants can be made me want to bring the good stuff to the US, like putting even taste aside, because what's great about it is that we can prove that healthy can also be delicious, but the health benefits are just so powerful. I always say to my team, if we were putting this in pill form, people would be paying thousands of dollars for it, right?
Yeah.
Like anything for longevity, as we see in sort of the biohacker community these days.
Right.
So, yeah, that was really the impetus for why. And it was centered around health, and our entire brand is centered around health. But you asked about how to tell a good olive oil from, a lesser oil. And I do have like two sets of tricks. So one is like when you're standing in the supermarket aisle and looking at that sea of sameness. And then the other is once you have something at home and you can
Taste it.
taste it.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. So my few tips for when you're standing in the supermarket aisle. So the very first thing you want to look at is how the olive oil is packaged.
Mhm.
So light, heat, and oxygen are the three enemies to good olive oil. So right away, if you see a clear bottle, you rule it out because light has basically already destroyed the contents of that olive oil.
Okay.
The second thing you want to look for is the material. So the only packaging that's safe for olive oil is glass and aluminum tins.
Okay.
Never plastic.
Okay.
So the phthalates in plastic are actually fat soluble. They're lipophilic. And I'm Greek, so I know what those two words mean. Lipos means fat and philos means friend. So plastic is like a friend to fats or cooking fats. And so they sort of become one. And we do extensive research on all our olive oil. Literally, we test every tank that we bring from Greece for chemical content, polyphenols, plastics, and pesticides. And we've also tested other competitive olive oils, very popular brands that package in plastic. And we almost always find microplastics in those olive oils that are packaged in plastic bottles.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Because, as a kid who grew up in the Costco era, my parents buying everything in bulk, like one of the things that knowing this information, and I did talk about oxidation that can happen in light, heat, and air from olive oil. But when I see my parents buy the big jug of extra virgin olive oil,
Mhm.
I'm using air quotes because I'm not really sure what the contents of that
Yeah.
is, in almost like it looks like almost like a gallon in a plastic container, and it sits in their shelf for 6 months at a time. Like, I want all the information to share with them so that they're not doing that anymore. And I realize that they're being cost conscious and they're trying to be frugal, but I want you to walk me through what some of that research on your competitors showed, because when you just showed me those slides prior to this call, like, it's kind of gut wrenching for me.
Mhm. Yeah. So Kirkland Signature, the Costco private label brand, does have olive oil in glass. So there is a price upgrade always, because of course plastic is cheaper than glass. But I would tell friends and family, just always buy, glass or aluminum tins. It'll just be much safer, because then the olive oil is not, being corrosive and eating away at the plastic.
Right.
We are trying to move people off of toxic vegetable oils and canola oils and bring them over to olive oil. And price is often a factor. And, people are looking at their grocery bill every single month, just like all of us are. But this really is a place where I feel that you do need to invest in your health. And it's really a couple of dollars. Plastics are an issue across the food industry. And, of course, from an environmental perspective as well. It's not the same though as drinking from a plastic water bottle. Water doesn't have the same qualities as a fat does, in terms of what I was describing in its fat solubility.
Right.
So yeah, that's why we always recommend, glass or aluminum tins. And when you look at, the studies that come back of what that olive oil looks like under a microscope, like you're literally seeing physical strings of plastic in the food that you're consuming.
And in your plastic study, can you tell the audience the number of microplastics that you were observing in those bottles and the length of those microplastics? Because I
Mhm.
think that was the most shocking to me. Was I feel like that could be visible by from what you shared by the naked eye. Like, how am I
Mhm.
not seeing these strands of plastic because they're so large?
So they're very thin, like think like even thinner than like a strand of hair, of course. But yeah, we've tested a number of popular brands that do package in plastic, and we have found some brands have more than 25 different microplastics in a single, specimen or single sample pulled of olive oil. And in some cases, the length of those microplastics has been over 20 millimeters. So in one case, we found, 24 millimeter microplastic in olive oil that people are consuming. And, we are concerned about human health and consumer health. And that's really sort of the whole reason behind why I entered this industry in the first place and why I created Kosterina. So I do feel it's important to share, at least what we know. And I think the industry needs to invest in doing some research on its own across the whole category to, get some really thorough scientific studies done to sort of prove out this point.
Well, yeah. I mean, my goal with this podcast is to keep people safe, not to
Mhm.
feed hunger, but just like,
Right.
let's get some real
Yeah.
concrete information out there so that we can make healthy choices for our family and decide if that makes sense for us. Like, if you're buying for my parents, that's a perfect example. I did not know that Costco had glass olive oil. That's going to be my first recommendation because that's their favorite place to shop. So
Yeah.
there we go. Like, at least I know that we're pulling some of those microplastics out. So you're at the grocery store, you look at the bottles, you have glass or aluminum only. What's the next thing we're looking at to source right?
Yeah. So back to the supermarket aisle. The second thing that I always recommend people look for is single source or monovarietal. So there are some good blends out there, but very often blends, especially at the lower end of the market, are companies that are buying up remnant olive oils from all over the world and mixing them together.
Got
And
it.
that's where you don't know if you're getting fresh olive oil. You're probably definitely not getting early harvest and all those health benefits from the polyphenols. And so I think single source monovarietal is definitely something to look for.
And is that a marketing term that only certain brands are putting on their bottle because they're proud of it, or is
Mhm.
it is it mandatory for you to put if it's a blend or a single source?
Yeah, it's not mandatory. A blend will typically say so on the front, but the way to find out is to turn it around and look for the country codes. So usually legally an olive oil will have to put on the back, where the product comes from. And so
Yeah.
if you see like four different country codes, like Italy, Spain, Tunisia, Turkey, usually that'll be a blend of different olive oils from several countries.
Okay, got it. Glass or aluminum, single source. What next?
Mhm. I always also like to say that price is a good indicator. And so back to the early harvest olive, when you squeeze an olive that is ripe, a lot of juice comes out. When
Mhm.
you squeeze an olive that is not yet ripe, much less juice comes out. And
Mhm.
so if you think about that, the producer is typically selling their olive oil by the yield, so by the pound or by the kilo.
Mhm.
But to get the good stuff, they need to harvest it early, which means they would get less. So
Mhm.
that's actually what makes good olive oil more expensive. If
Mhm.
you're seeing an olive oil at the supermarket shelf that's below $10 for something like 500 ml, which is 17 ounces, it's probably not good quality. Like it's very hard to get, a very inexpensive price and still have decent quality olive oil. So price can be an indicator. Of course, like you can't always rely on that because there may be some bad actors who are pricing high intentionally.
Mhm.
But generally, like our mission, and I know many brands who are doing business with integrity, are pricing to be as accessible as possible.
Right. Okay.
Like trying to get that good olive oil at the best possible price for the consumer.
For sure. So can you take me through the next set of parameters for looking for a good olive oil? Hopefully you've picked a decently priced olive oil that's packaged in glass, that's single source, you bring it home. How do we know if it's good?
Yeah. And then just one last thing to mention there is early harvest is always something great to look for too. Some
Okay.
brands will put it on the bottle, some brands will not, but early harvest is a sign of a good high phenolic extra virgin olive oil.
Okay, great.
Okay, so then you have it home, and really the next thing you want to do is smell and taste it.
Mhm.
So you pour a little bit in a glass, and what we learned in studying to become an olive oil sommelier is that you kind of hold the glass in your hand and swirl it around and kind of warm it in your hand to release the aromas, and then bring it to your nose quickly and take a big inhale. And so what you should smell is something fresh. So if you know that you have a good olive oil and you compare it to, your supermarket brand, you will smell a really big difference. So I do these types of tastings all the time. And I've heard people say like, after smelling Kosterina and then smelling a store brand olive oil in many cases, they'll say like, oh, this one smells a little bit like plastic, or I think I need to cleanse my palate. I can't smell anything anymore. I had someone say, oh, like this smells like my daughter's doll. And it really is like a very stark contrast when you have them. So, when you take an inhale from a really high quality extra virgin olive oil, you should get like green grass, green tomato, banana, artichoke, lots of different aromatic notes.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So,
bright, alive,
exactly.
produce from the alive olive oil. That makes
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. So you've smelt it. Now the next step is to taste it. And so what you'll do is take a tiny sip, and what you should get is a slight pepperiness. Some would call it a little bit of a burn at the back of your throat. And those are the polyphenols or the antioxidants that have those incredible health benefits. So that's always my first, tip for people. It's good dinner party conversation too. The little burn is a really good sign. It will not burn your throat when you're eating it on food. It really sort of just adds depth and flavor to whatever you're putting it on. But when you sip it alone, you should get that.
Okay, great. So when you went through your sommelier classes for olive oil, was really like learning to smell and smell for notes, just like a wine sommelier, and
Yeah.
then tasting for notes at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, and also, during the sommelier course, they teach you all different varietals and, what pairs with what types of food and how it pairs with certain wines. So there was a lot of that culinary aspect, even though I was sort of like laser focused on the health benefits.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there was a funny story that came out of the sommelier course, which I loved and definitely was part of the inspiration for launching Kosterina, which was the researcher who discovered oleocanthal, which is one of the most powerful polyphenols for health that are
Yeah.
in naturally in olive oil. And he was up there telling the story about how he discovered it. And so he went to Italy for a conference for work. He was doing research for an ibuprofen.
Yeah.
And as part of his research, he was taking uncoated ibuprofen. So he goes to Italy, tastes this olive oil, and he realized that at the back of his throat, he was getting the same sort of tingle that he got from taking the uncoated ibuprofen, that same burn.
Okay.
So he brings the olive oil back to his research team here in the US, and his lead head researcher takes a sip and he said, why did you put ibuprofen in the olive oil? And he was like, that's just it. I didn't. And they discovered that oleocanthal and oleacin, which is the second one, have the same benefit as, chemical man-made ibuprofen, from this very natural substance that, grows on its own.
That's
That's
why
pretty
all the Greek mamas are like, "You've got a headache? Olive oil."
exactly.
I feel like
Something's wrong.
it's my big fat Greek wedding or something, like,
It,
but not Windex, olive
it's
oil.
exactly that. Yeah. I remember when that movie came out and friends were like, "Oh my God, that's so funny. Like, isn't that such hyperbole?" I'm like, "No, it's actually like exactly like that." It's
Yeah.
like pretty spot on.
Like, that is my life. That is my family.
Yep,
It's funny, I
definitely.
always joke with my sister, that used to be one of my favorite movies, actually, and my youngest sister named her daughter Juliana, and my youngest is Julian, and they're 6 months apart, and I had to
Oh.
call her and be like, "This has been my favorite boy name forever," and I always joke every time I see her, I'm like, "We're like my big fat Greek wedding. This is Nick and Nikolai and the other." Yeah, it's so funny, but
It's really true. Like there are 4 Katinas in my family because we're all named after our grandmother. So it's like it's not even a joke. It's totally accurate.
I love it. I love it. Well, you know what? I really want to share on this podcast next. I'd love to get to know your family a little bit better through the podcast too, but for your cousins. But back to the information at hand.
Yeah.
I really want to dive into the industry because I thought that was really fascinating for me whenever it comes to talking about a brand or sharing a brand. And I want to be totally clear on this podcast. Katina is not paying to be a guest on this show. There is the only financial incentive will be a 15% discount for you guys if you want to purchase on our site. We'll put that in the show notes. But this is more female entrepreneur to female entrepreneur. We connected. We met at Expo West one time for like a hot second. And then we were reconnected and had like a Zoom where I just wanted to know more about the industry. I think as for me, now that I have a product company and understanding, being able to pull back what we call like the velvet curtain and say like, well, how is this being made? And like, what is norm in the process? And how does someone like blend and mix protein powder? And what are the flavors? And how are we hiding things? And what's like, give it to me straight. Like there's so much marketing and consumerism that's happening that people aren't asking really deep questions. And so I really loved our talk, like our conversation. A few months ago. And I really wanted to just share this because there are so many steps in the process of making protein powder. And there are so many steps in the process of making olive oil and ensuring what you're getting is what you paid for. And there are certain standards that you can maintain for me, whether that be, like you testing for pesticide residue, testing for me, it's like heavy metals. For you, it's that polyphenol content, it's pesticides, it's microplastics. So, I know your family is from Greece, but you need to source a lot of olive oil now. You're a national brand. What does it look like from your position as a founder and CEO of this brand? Like, how are you ensuring we're getting the good stuff? And what does the olive oil industry really look like?
Mhm. Yeah, and exactly what you said is our obsession. Like there is a lot of good olive oil in this world. It's mostly at family farms. And so it's very hard to get that product to America in its still high quality form. And, it has to also be transported properly at certain temperatures. It can't get too hot. It needs to be stored at certain temperatures. Can't get too warm because, as we said, heat is the enemy to good olive oil. And so, I think what we're doing is definitely a challenge. We are obsessed with quality. The way that we manage that is with the partners that we work with. And so, being from Greece and having a lot of family and friends in the industry who helped me start out and, meet all the producers in Southern Greece in the region that I'm from who grow the way that we want to. So, our requirements are only Koroniki varietal of extra virgin of olives to make that Koroniki extra virgin olive oil. Only organic farming methods. Certified organic is not as well proliferated in Greece as it is in the US. And so, but we only work with farmers who use organic farming methods and we test for pesticides. And then, of course, high polyphenol content. So the timing of the harvest and the way the olives are treated until they get to the mill are all really important. And so what's happening in the industry, it's really hard to do this at scale. And we're trying to create sort of a best-in-class sourcing, production, and transportation process to make sure that that olive oil is as good from the mill as it is on your table in California.
Mhm.
Many companies are cutting corners. Some are not, many are not. There is some good quality olive oil out there. I think, using the tricks that I outlined for when you're shopping and then when you're tasting it, are definitely things to keep in mind. But taste will tell you a lot. It won't tell you everything, but taste will tell you a lot. If you're getting those aromas and you're getting that flavor, chances are it started out as a high quality olive oil. And if it's in the right packaging, chances are it still is. So you can, like, this is a product where you really can taste the quality. And we do hear people tell us, like, oh my God, I feel like I just tasted real olive oil for the first time. I don't think I can go back.
Yeah. I will say it's funny because I didn't know how to source good olive oil. And I made, once I learned about the light and the heat and, screwing on your lid tight, keeping it in like a cooler, dark pantry or whatever, instead of like in glass on your stovetop right by the, right?
Yeah.
I did start sourcing like the tins from Greece, from Thrive Market, and have since like tried yours. And there is a difference. Like I can taste the difference between the olive oils, but even like that step up for me was like, whoa, the veggies taste so much better. My fish tastes so much better. Like, wow, there's a whole world there where I'm really interested in understanding like the tasting notes and the differences. So, but I do want to walk it back. So like when you say early harvest of these specific olives from southern Greece, how long are they grown? And then how are they packaged? How are they transported? And when do you do your testing?
So there's one harvest in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's typically in the fall. It starts in October and it ends in January.
Okay.
Early harvest changes, the definition of early harvest changes farm to farm, depending on where you're growing. So for example, on one of our key farms, the olives grow in sand. They're on the beach, literally. And those are still early harvest, but they're harvested a little bit later in the season. So we're literally watching them for the right color and the right taste and flavor for the timing of harvest. So early harvest means something different farm to farm. But the producer will know what true early harvest means.
Okay. And then when they're being pressed, what's the best in class way that olives could be pressed to maintain the polyphenol content and then be packaged to also maintain that?
Yes. So we also press our olives within 4 hours of harvesting them. Okay. One thing that can ruin the olive oil is leaving them out overnight. If they ever encounter rain, that's also really problematic, and it'll create what's called defects in the olive oil. You have to be super careful about what you transport them in. So many Greeks still use these like burlap sacks, which can make it too hot. So those are a no-no. We use these crates that are kind of open on the side to bring everything to the mill. And then they need to be pressed pretty quickly. So what happens is like the farmers will work all day, harvest, and then bring everything over to the mill in the evening. And then the mill runs all night long. Wow. The mills will typically run the organic product first, then run, all the conventional olive oils, and then do a full cleaning before the next day when the next batch comes in.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. There's so much that goes into it. Like when I'm with our producers and like I sit at their dinner table, it's just like so much love goes into this process. And I also love calling attention to that because it really is something so special that just like, it truly is this liquid gold that should never be wasted.
Right. Absolutely. So when it's milled and then it's obviously not being brought in your glass bottles overseas, I'm sure you're doing that here. What is it? What's the container that you're using and how long after it's placed in those containers does it ship to you? And again, sorry to bring this back up, but like at what point are you testing this material to make sure what you say is on your bottle is what we're getting when we buy it?
Yes. So they're brought from Greece to the US in food grade, what are called totes. And then we bring them on the ocean only in the dead of winter when it's cold. And then we store it here in temperature controlled environments and fill the bottles as needed.
Okay.
And so, it's really important to like handle the olive oil properly all the way through.
Right. Okay.
And then I feel like you asked me another question that I'm forgetting.
Testing.
Yes, we test every single tank of olive oil. So what happens is once the olive oil is milled, so it's actually cold extracted. Many people call it cold pressed. That's not technically accurate. It's cold extracted. And that just means that there's no heat or chemicals in the process. It's basically just like a crushing machine.
Okay.
and it takes the water out of the olive and separates it from the oil. They get stored in these very large tanks. And
Mhm.
so when we pull the olive oil from the producer's tank, we test it there
Mhm.
for chemicals. So chemical testing for the polyphenols, acidity, etc. We test it for plastics, and we test it for pesticides.
Okay.
And then we bring everything to the US and we do the same testing again once
Mhm.
it's in our bottles. And we also like test our olive oil for most of those things on a bi-monthly basis. So we base it at our chemical lab, and we want to see like what's happening, because polyphenol content actually naturally declines over time. And
Yes.
so we test it. We want to see like what is that decline for our olive oil in our bottles. And so we actually test it every 2 months of the year. We keep a set of bottles from the same harvest. We test it every 2 months and kind of see what happens to the polyphenol content. And the really good news there that we found out just last year was after we tested our sixth bottle, so in month 12, our tester reached out to us and was like, I actually think you guys sent me the new harvest. Like the polyphenol content hasn't declined, like something's wrong. And we confirmed that it was last year's bottle, and that the polyphenol content, because it sort of started so high and those polyphenols were protecting it, did not decline by 50% like most brands do. It declined by like 8%, which
Wow.
is really impressive.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and it has a lot to do with the process of bringing it here and containing it
Yes,
in glass, in dark
exactly.
too.
Yes.
So interesting. So then when someone buys a bottle from the shelves, what's best practice of how long it can be out, and what's best practice of keeping your olive oil, maintaining that polyphenol content, knowing that like you're opening the cap and closing it and keeping it on your counter in your pantry? Like what do you do with your olive oil?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about opening the cap, and like as long as you're closing it, you're good. Once a bottle is opened, you really want to consume it within 3 months, because oxygen is getting in once it's opened. But you shouldn't be using a bottle over 3 months. Like, use your olive oil. Please pour it on everything. It's really good for you and it tastes good.
Yeah.
So like we have a bottle in our house and it lasts a week. So I get confused when people ask me like, how long can I keep this?
Yeah.
Which is funny. So yeah, and then you want to store it in a cool, dry place. We leave it out on our countertop. As long as you're not keeping it like directly over the stove, heat is not really hitting it, so you're good.
Okay. And then I mean, I'm the same as you because we go through olive oil like it's our job. And
Yeah.
if Chris is roasting veggies, like I actually just ran into a friend after drop off this morning, grabbing a coffee, and she was like, I don't know what Chris did to the cauliflower, but Zeke keeps talking about the cauliflower from this weekend, because I was out of town and Chris had a couple of the dads over with some of the boys
Yeah.
from the baseball team. And she's like, he will never eat my cauliflower. And I was like, I'll tell you exactly what he did. Like he doused
Salad it.
our veggies. I'm like, not like 1 to 2 tablespoons. He is like a 5 tablespoon. It is like restaurant quality, dripping in olive oil and crispy. And so I'm like, yeah, that's the way I like it too, Zeke.
Yeah, it's
Or-
so good. I call it nature's candy. Honestly, when you roast veggies in olive oil and salt, it tastes like candy. It's so delicious. Like I just eat it from the stove top.
Totally. You're making me want to go make some right now after this podcast. Um, so you launch your olive oils first, right?
Yes, yes.
And yeah, I see them behind you. I know the white bottle and the blue bottle. Can you talk about the differences between extra virgin olive oil and an everyday olive oil?
Yes. So actually, our white and blue bottles are our two hero products, and they are both extra virgin.
Mhm.
And the white is for finishing and drizzling, and the blue is for cooking and baking.
Okay.
They can be used interchangeably. It's just that the blue is slightly later harvest, which means more juice comes out of the olive, which means we can get to a cheaper price
Right.
for a very good quality olive oil. So when you're cooking and you're applying heat anyway, because that polyphenol content is going to degrade, we recommend using the blue. So you're
Got it.
still starting from like a very high level. But the white we sort of save for drizzling and dipping, bread dipping, and anytime temperature is not applied.
Right. Well, I see both of those at the grocery store. Chris is trained now. He if he's at Whole Foods, he's bringing home one of those bottles. So I'll be able to tell him the difference now, which is great. But you were so sweet after our call. You did send me like your chili olive oil and the different varieties like of
Yes.
balsamic and the vinegars. And I think just using all of your stuff really prompted me to be like, okay, I need Katina on the podcast. We need to talk about
Awesome.
this because there's a huge movement. First of all, the chili olive oil on anything. I'm like on eggs, on avocado. But I love the spice because it reminds me of being in Europe, like back in the day when they would have like the flat pizzas and they would just, or flatbreads and they just drizzle a chili olive oil on top. And you're like,
Yes.
I just need more of that. Like that is unbelievably good. And like, give me some. So it's cool to be able to create that. Like I drizzled it on an avocado, like sourdough toast, here. And it was a little spicy for Tashin, but Bash was just like, give me more. So he's my palate person. Like
I
I
love
know
it.
he's going to be open to all the things. But what was really surprising to me was the vinegars. So I've used vinegar in sparkling water with ice for like mocktails, and what I call mom tails. Like I feel like I want a fizzy drink and Chris brings home, maybe it's like after school and I've kind of stepped in mom mode and dinner mode and cul-de-sac play. And he's like, let me go surf. I'm like, go. So he'll run and surf. And there's occasional times where Be Bad by Chris will swoop through Monarch Beach Market and get himself some IPA beers. And I want a little something fun.
Yes.
And I have never tasted vinegars like this. There is so much flavor there, fruit forward, like real flavor. And it's a little bit of a problem now because the crushed blueberry one, Bash is like, can I have a blueberry spritzer? And I'm like, you're a bougie 5-year-old. What is
That's great.
But it's so delicious. Like a tablespoon or two of your vinegar, fill the rest of the glass up with ice and sparkling water. And I'm just happy as a clam. So
Yeah.
can you talk to me about how you expanded your product line, what you went into, what you have available, what you're excited about, and how you use your products?
Definitely. So, yes, we started with our extra virgin olive oils and then we launched our flavored olive oils. So we have a garlic, which is also a cult favorite, like the spicy people who love garlic, love our garlic olive oil. And then we have a Greek herb and lemon, which is just like amazing salad dressing, chicken marinade. It's like your classic Greek olive oil. And the fact that it has lemon is just kind of like a time saver, kitchen hack. And then you mentioned our vinegars. So we have two different types of vinegars. We have a line of dark balsamics that are great for salad dressing and marinades and, roasting Brussels sprouts and all the things. We have a fig flavor that people really, really love. A woman recently wrote in and told us that it was her secret weapon. Like her husband started telling her that her cooking got better. She didn't tell him that that's what it was. But the crushed fruit vinegar line of vinegars is really special. So we were disciples of the glucose goddess and, wearing levels and really trying to understand how to reduce glucose spikes. And as you guys know, or as many people know, drinking apple cider vinegar can have that blood sugar stabilization benefit. But ACV doesn't taste very good. So we started working with our producers to develop a vinegar that was drinkable that actually tasted good. And I think, based on everything you're saying, we were really successful. These fruit vinegars come in strawberry, blueberry, and tangerine. And they're like, the acid in the vinegar will amplify the flavor of the fruit. So we always say it tastes like not just like a blueberry, but better than a blueberry because that acid is sort of amplifying the fruity flavor. And like you said, you can just pour a little bit into seltzer and garnish it with something, and you really feel like you're having a mocktail. It can be addictive. But they're also good cocktail mixers, like the tangerine with a little Casamigos and some seltzer is like a summer go-to around our household and friends' households. Sprig of mint, and you're kind of all set. But yeah, I definitely recommend them both for salads, but also for drinking.
Yeah, no, I think they're phenomenal. Like so much flavor. The tangerine I did with like my version of a Chinese chicken salad, and it was
Yes.
the bee's knees,
Yeah.
chef's kiss. So I mean, I'm an absolute convert. Like I really can taste the difference, and there's so much flavor in every single bottle. And again, like this is not a sponsored podcast. This is just like female entrepreneur to female entrepreneur being like really excited about your brand, and having some knowledge now as to like, okay, like this is what the research is saying around smoke points and polyphenol content, but also knowing like, well, if olive oil isn't good, then I don't have the smoke point. I can't cook up to that 400
Right.
degree to get those roasted vegetables so delicious and caramelized. I can't trust that. And I know there's been a lot of exposés around contamination of the olive oil and avocado oil industry where there are large businesses not doing the right thing and blending. Is there a certain percentage of olive oil that can be present in a bottle and be called olive oil without it actually being 100% olive oil?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, unfortunately, it's not regulated at all. And there have been many olive oils that say extra virgin on the front that are cut with other oils. So cheaper oils like vegetable oil. There are chemicals or chlorophyll added to change the color so that it looks more like olive oil. So yeah, I think you're kind of back to like brand trust,
Mhm.
looking at price point and packaging, and then tasting it to really understand if it's good quality.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just, you've given me so much to give back to my audience. And I really, really appreciate it because this is the kind of stuff that you go like, okay, like one step at a time, cleaning out one thing, one
Yes,
beauty product at a time, one olive oil at a time. And then you
the
find
journey.
one thing and I turn into like an absolute loyalist. But knowing just having these tips and tricks really helps because it does. Like if you're cooking at home and you're a minimalist like me, where you're looking to like roast a protein or like, grill something and have some veggies on the side and a salad and maybe a starch. It's simple cooking and it's those kind of sauces and oils and flavors and citrus and herbs that like take regular, what someone would say like boring plain cooking, to this very like aromatic, like deep flavor profile kind of a meal where you feel satisfied. It's an experience as opposed to like meal prepping a boring protein and veggie that you're like, again. Like
Yes.
that's the difference for me in being able to cook simply. Like I love Ina Garten. I love Giada. Like these are my like, whew, these are my people. When I think back to college and when I would have some downtime, I'm like, I was watching the Food Network and like hanging on every word. And if you look at any of Ina's recipes, it's like a protein, a good oil, like very simple
Yeah.
foods that she just elevates with things like olive oil, citrus, and herbs. And you're like,
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
garlic, little onion, you're good.
It's all
So
about the ingredients. It's so true. And it really can be so simple. Like the Mediterranean diet wins year after year after year. And yes, we do not live in the Mediterranean, but how do we take it and make it the modern Mediterranean diet for our current lifestyle? And it actually does work really well because, like you're saying, it's like you marinate a protein in some olive oil and vinegar, and then you roast some veggies and maybe boil some rice. You have a full, like really healthy, delicious meal.
absolutely. So that makes me curious now. So you're running this big company. You have major ambitions. You have your olive oils, you have your vinegars, you have a full skincare line. I want to talk about that in a minute. Um, what has it been like to have this passion project turn into like an amazing, massive company?
Well, my work on Kosterina honestly has been like a dream come true. I can't even say that without being like hyperbolic, but it really is everything that I love in my career and personal life coming together as one. I get to talk about food and beauty and grease all day long, which are just all my favorite things. And my work is includes like tasting 18 different olive oil cakes sometimes. Like that's my job, which is fun. But no, really, I think we have such an amazing opportunity to change the way people eat. And I have been so horrified by the food system. I did work at a very large food retailer before this and saw just how many people are living off of sugary cereal and Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and pair that with the diabetes epidemic in like adults and children. And I just feel like we have a lot of work to do. And this is just like our little step in trying to educate people in the right direction and change behavior. So, yeah, it really has been amazing. It's, of course, not without its challenges. It's hard every single day. And I have 3 young kids. So, yeah, what I do for food is we literally make the same thing every week. So, every Monday, it's the same dinner. Every Tuesday, it's the same dinner. Every Wednesday, it's the same dinner. And that means it's the same shopping list at the beginning of the week. So, that just helps to put some things on autopilot.
Okay, so now we have to know what these dinners are.
They're really nothing like crazy special. Like one is grilled chicken, broccoli and rice. The other is like a Greek taco salad, as I call it, like a big salad with Greek chopped meat, like almost like a Greek bolognese sauce.
Yeah.
But it has like oregano and more Greek spices, and of course, tons of extra virgin olive oil. We make, roasted salmon with big sheet of pan of roasted veggies. So yeah, simple, simple, simple.
Yeah. I mean, I think that allows for you to be consistent. At least that's been my experience is
Mhm.
not setting myself to some high standard of like, I'm going to like research all these recipes and make something new every single night. And the reality is like, I've seen things go to waste that way when I'm like, oh, I'm
Yes,
pressed for time. We got home from baseball.
totally.
We just need to like take these chicken breasts, slice them in half and roast them so they go quick. And like grab
Exactly.
the asparagus because I know it's going to cook faster than, the Brussels sprouts and my kids are going to have plated dinner. Like that kind of thing can really make a difference in not grabbing takeout and not ordering in to like controlling the controllable and then knowing like, wow, I feel really good that even if maybe it's slightly boring, that I can elevate it
Yeah.
with this olive oil or I can elevate it with this herb or sauce. And I know, okay, like they're eating real whole foods and I'm eating real whole foods. And it feels
Exactly.
really good. It's in no way perfect over here by any
Mhm.
means, I'm really thankful for the companies that do quality work and make food faster on the days when I need it. But this kind of thing makes you excited to play in your kitchen. Like I've
Mhm.
been excited to try and play with your products and how I can elevate things and so for that I'm really thankful.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I need to make sure we get you some of our new olives too. Have I sent you those? Okay,
No.
I absolutely will. Yeah, you had asked before, what we're excited about. That's our newest category, obviously like very adjacent to what we do in olive oil. And we the way that we cure them is a natural curing process in sea salt.
Okay.
So what my grandmother used to do and all her friends is they would hang a bag of olives like and let it with a string from their house, let it cure in the sea for months. So these bags would just kind of like the sea water would cure these olives over time. And our producer mimics that same process, like and think like a wave pool.
Okay. Just
It's
a
really
salty
cool.
wave pool.
Salty wave pool, and what that results in is a fermented olive. And so, like, getting fermented foods in our diet is also really difficult. Like, my kids don't eat kimchi. To be honest, I don't really love kimchi or sauerkraut. And so, olives are just such an easy way to get fermented foods into our diet, and they taste amazing. And they're sort of dry packed and snackable directly from the jar. So, I'll definitely be sending you those.
Oh, I'm excited. I'll definitely try them. And then you said you were really passionate about beauty and so I want to talk about your beauty line because it almost looks like if you're on YouTube, you guys will see behind Katina. It's almost as long of a line, as long of a line as your olive oil and vinegar line. Like, what's going on over there? What was the impetus? I know when you have hero products, at least as a business owner, and anyone comes to look at your books or talk to you about your business, they'll be like, "Don't deviate. How do you
Mhm.
get your olive oil into more hands? Like, take your hero product and run with it." Like, there's a lot of SKUs over there in that beauty line of yours. Like, what's the impetus of it? Why are you so excited about it? What's going on?
Yeah, no,
And J-Lo
absolutely.
putting olive oil on her face.
Yes, she helps normalize it. But, as a Greek kid, when something is wrong with your skin, your mom tells you to go put olive oil on it.
Okay.
It is like the safest and most efficacious moisturizer. It used to be prescribed by doctors for healing purposes. And we actually baptize our babies in olive oil in Greek culture. So, like, doctors recommend it for cradle cap and things like that. So, there are true, true benefits from the antioxidants, just like it does on the inside, on, the surface of our skin. And so, the way that I've always thought about it is health and wellness truly comes from both the inside and the outside. The short story for me was in my 20s, I used to suffer from like really bad cystic acne. I went to probably every dermatologist in Manhattan. I got put on antibiotics for years, like crazy topicals. And the answer for me was dairy. All I did was stop having a latte every day. I still eat dairy, I still eat cheese, but I just used to have like a big latte every morning and like poof, magically clear skin. So it was just a big aha moment for me, like, oh my God, it's so much about what I'm putting in my body, and not just what's going on the outside. But, a lot of brands have toxic chemicals in them. And what we developed was just a very clean line of basic skincare, leveraging extra virgin olive oil for the hydration and antioxidant benefits. Yeah, that's what we developed with the skincare line.
So cool. It's fun for you probably not to have to purchase that stuff too.
Yes, exactly. It's they're developed by me and my team for me and my team. And then we just know that others will have the same sort of needs and wishes as we do. So yeah, we're pretty obsessed around here.
That's so awesome. So if people are tuning in and they're just getting to know Kosterina, where can they find you on the shelves and where can they find you online?
Yeah. Kosterina.com definitely has our full line of products. And I recommend starting with the white and blue olive oils. Those are our heroes. You will fall in love. You will never go back to your store brand again. And then if you love, flavors, definitely check out our flavored oils and vinegars. If you're, a home chef, that's where you can really kind of go crazy. And then I would recommend, like our basic moisturizer, our body oil is amazing if you want to try anything on the skincare line. And then we also sell at Whole Foods nationally. So by this summer, we'll have 14 of our products at Whole Foods nationally. So people will be able to find us there. And then we have actually a major launch coming up in the fall as well that I'll talk about next time I come on the podcast.
I'm going to end this recording and then you'll get to tell me the secret.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can't thank you enough for being here. I mean, we deep dove olive oil in this podcast episode, but I think it's such a daily staple. And I wanted to bring my recommendations up to like current day and age so that I answer so many DMs about, oh my God, this is my face. Why are you using that on your high heat and roasting? But it really olive oil is an everyday staple for me in my home, from dressings to roasting. It's absolutely delicious. My kids love it. It makes our veggies great. I'm obsessed with your vinegars. I mean, I really haven't had any that taste as good. You're really fruit forward, and you can taste that, which is really nice. So I really appreciate all your hard work in bringing us some clean products, and I want everyone to know about them. So thank you so much for being here, Katina, and for giving the audience a discount on your product. I think we decided on Be Well for 15% off.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share information about people making the right decision when looking for the best olive oils. So appreciate it.
You betcha. Yeah. From one female entrepreneur to another, I'm really happy to be a megaphone for your brand. It's really cool.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly.